Pokemon Go is currently riding a major high. I will say that 2025 was probably one of the best years for Pokemon Go, and I think Niantic has done some really solid things to make the game extremely fun to play. However, I do think there is one particular thing that they haven't done a lot with, and I still think to this day this has been a major issue. And I'm, of course, talking about what it's like to play Pokemon Go in rural areas, and that's precisely what I want to talk about in this video. Alright, what's happening everyone? Count Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon Go video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. So I wanted to have a bit of a discussion video talking about the rural issue because I think this has always been the nagging problem with Pokemon Go. With players who live in rural areas, they do not get the same experience as those who live in major cities and big suburbs where there's a lot of players. And this is something that has persisted pretty much since the beginning, and I totally understand that it's essentially a part of the game's design, but I do think Niantic could have done a lot more to mitigate this issue, and they really do need to put a focus on it because I think for everything that they are doing to Pokemon Go, it's absolutely great. I think there's a lot of really good things that have been released over these past couple of years, and they have been doing a really good job with the game. That's my own personal opinion. Some of that might be because they sold the game to Scopely, and Scopely is going to allow the Niantic dev team to do whatever they want compared to the previous leadership, but I do think that when it comes to rural gameplay, they haven't done much. By my own personal experiences, I play in a major suburb of Chicago, and I do have access to the downtown area of Chicago as well. So for major events like Pokemon Go Fest or Go Tour or the most recent Wild Area event, if I want to go to the city, that's totally possible, and I usually have a really great time. But if I stay here in the suburbs, I also have a really great time, and I have the convenience of not having to go far. And I think that's mainly because I'm pretty lucky that there is a major Pokemon Go presence within my area. But I've also played in certain places where there may not necessarily be a huge Pokemon Go presence, and the gameplay definitely feels completely different. There are many times where I've been visiting some friends in rural areas and I just cannot get a raid group to save my life, or if I'm looking for Pokestops or Pokemon spawns, there's just nothing in that area. And I think this is going to be the experience for a majority of people who play this game. Unfortunately, there's just not much when it comes to this game's design to help these players out. They have certainly done some things to mitigate some of the rural challenges, like for example, opening and sending gifts. This is a way for you to still get items like Pokeballs and potions and revives without having to have a whole bunch of Pokestops around you. And of course, with remote raids, that's your way of still being able to participate in raid battles, even if you do not have a gym or a raiding community around you. But it's not enough, because of course, remote raid passes are incredibly expensive, and then of course, opening and sending gifts will give you a hard cap on how many items you can get. So for a lot of players, if they're not living in at least a big suburban area like myself, they're going to have a much more difficult time enjoying Pokemon Go. And there are certainly players out there who have made the experience their own. They've certainly taken a lot of those challenges and still found some enjoyment out of the game. To those players, I always say that is very impressive. I do think that for this game in particular, you really can't get much out of it unless you live in a higher population area. But still, there are players who find fun out of it, and they live in farmland areas and different things like that. And then there are, of course, players who live in rural areas who just decide to cheat. They use spoofing apps, different things like that. And to them, I totally understand the reason why they would do that, because otherwise they do not get a Pokemon Go experience that's worthwhile. So they have to cheat and find a place where they can get a really positive Pokemon Go experience. I totally understand that sentiment. But yeah, I think there's a lot of things Niantic could do. There are certainly areas in the game that could see some vast improvements to give players who live in rural areas an actual chance at keeping up with those who live in city areas. One thing I would like to see is less restrictions on Niantic Wayfarer. If they could submit Pokestops and get those Pokestops approved, then they could populate their area with more points of interest, and that would mean more gyms, more Pokestops, more different things like the max battle, power spots, like they would actually be able to have a much more better experience. And even within my own local areas, I'm starting to see even more Pokestops pop up every single day, and that definitely contributes to a much more positive experience for myself. So for people who live in rural areas, that's definitely something Niantic should look into. Get people to actively engage in Niantic Wayfarer. Maybe they can have some more crossover promotions where if you actively are involved in Niantic Wayfarer, you could also get some special items or special Pokemon within Pokemon Go. And I think, of course, this is a big one. They need to make sure they're not banning players for doing Niantic Wayfarer, because recently, I think it was last year, people were starting to get banned in Pokemon Go for submitting, I guess, false stops within Niantic Wayfarer. And I totally understand they want to keep the integrity of the system by not having players cheat the system and create Pokestops that are not legitimate. I totally get that, but having the harshest form of punishment behind that, and for people who might have good intentions and they just do not realize they're going to get their accounts banned, that's going to draw a lot of players away from engaging in a system that could actually help some communities out. So this is something I do think Niantic needs to take a second look at, especially now because when it comes to their new owners, Scopely Inc., they do not necessarily have the responsibility of populating their game with a whole bunch of points of interest. Now it's something that is essentially just to the benefit of the gameplay. And I think because of that, they need to take another look at how they detect people who are creating false Pokestops, but also just lift some of those restrictions so people who have good intentions could actually create some Pokestops for their communities. Now, I think another thing that Niantic should consider doing is actually doing more things that are more remote friendly. For example, remote raid passes, that has always been what I would consider one of the best things to happen to Pokemon Go, but of course they did nerf it over the years, and I feel like at this point a lot of the community has kind of gotten used to the nerfs, which I think is a bit unfortunate. But I think Niantic should lift some of those nerfs. Maybe they could cut the prices of remote raid passes just a little bit, and actually encourage players who live in remote areas to at least do some remote raiding. Maybe what they could do is that they could have some sort of system that will detect how many gyms are around you, and if you do not have a whole bunch of gyms, then you will have a bit of a discount when it comes to the remote raid passes. I don't know what they could come up with, but I think that's something that could potentially work, because I think for a lot of players out there who live in rural areas, remote raiding is essentially their only way of getting legendaries and mythicals in the game. And for a lot of those players, it's just such a tedious thing where they're just not able to do as many raids as others because it's just so expensive. So I think this is something Niantic could definitely look into, making the experience a lot more positive for rural players, because, like I said, when it comes to this core aspect of Pokemon Go, which is raiding, it's just a negative experience for a lot of people out there who live in rural areas. And then finally, I think this is something Niantic should definitely lean into, especially into the new year, but they should add some more content that is geared towards just soloable content, rather than just having content like raid battles or party play, all that stuff. Like, yeah, that's all really cool gameplay, and I think it's been some great additions in Pokemon Go, but they should add more content that players could achieve solo. Like, I think the new level system is great because it's a lot of stuff that involves you just playing the game by yourself. And certainly there are aspects of it that will require the help of other players, but I think for them to add more soloable content with some really good rewards, that's definitely going to encourage a lot more players, even those who live in rural areas, to be able to engage with Pokemon Go and still feel rewarded for it. So maybe in 2026, this is something that they could look into. Maybe they could add some new gameplay where it's going to be a lot of fun for those who are just by themselves within a rural area. I think that would definitely be a huge help to the game, and it's something I would definitely enjoy as well. So yeah, all in all, I do feel like Pokemon Go is in a really good place. I do recognize that this video might seem a little negative and very critical, but I really do think at the end of the day, Niantic is doing a good job. I think Pokemon Go is in a place that's probably the best it's ever been in the last several months, or several years rather. Like, there are so many things about this game that I am enjoying, like bottle caps and the new leveling system, all these new very powerful fusion Pokemon and Mega Evolutions that have come out. Like, the game just feels amazing right now, and it just feels like every time I log into Pokemon Go, there's just something for me to work on that doesn't necessarily feel like a chore. I think that was an issue that was kind of plaguing Pokemon Go for a little bit, but nowadays it doesn't feel that way. And nowadays it feels like I'm actually really enjoying the gameplay, and I really hope they continue. But yeah, I still feel like for this game to improve, these are some of the things that they still need to look into and come up with different solutions that are creative and something that the community will definitely get behind. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I just kind of wanted to just turn on my camera and talk about this because I've been kind of thinking about it all day, and it's something that I really haven't seen any movement on, so I really hope that changes in 2026. But in any case, that's going to be it for this video. Definitely share your thoughts regarding everything that I talked about down below. What do you think could be a solution to the rural issue? Is there something that you would like to see Niantic do? Definitely share what that is, and yeah, let's have a great discussion. And thank you so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe if it's your first time here, and don't forget that notification bell so you know exactly when I upload videos. And real quick, let me give a shout out to every single one of my patrons on Patreon. You make this channel content possible. If you want to support the Jinsula channel, the best way you can do that is going to be by joining my Patreon. And if you decide to become a paid Patreon member, I'm going to add you to my Pokemon Go friends list. So that means for stuff like remote raids, the friendship system, opening and sending gifts, all that good stuff. If you want to play Pokemon Go with me, then make sure you go and check out my Patreon. I'll put a link to it in the description below. And if you want to support my channel in a completely different way, you could do so by following me on social media. My handle is @Jinsula. I'm on the platforms you see right now on the bottom of your screen. Make sure you go there and give me a follow, and that'll be a huge help to my channel as well. And that's going to be it for this video. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself today, and I'll catch you in the next one.